We're live.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another pop-up podcast of the WTTA Guns and Mental Health Podcast. I'm joined today by my co-host, Kevin Berry. Kevin, how are you?
Fighting another cold, but other than that, doing well.
We're all fighting colds, Kevin. SHOT Show's over, so now it's cold season for everybody that's in the industry. Now, today we want to do something a little unique, something we've never done before. We just kind of want to test this out, but we want to break down a clip that I would consider it's a segment, right? A news segment on a controversial topic. I think this one is centered in Utah, correct? Yes. Okay, good. This is a subject that is very touchy, no matter who you discuss it with. Everyone has an opinion on it, whether you're in the firearms industry or part of the 2A community, or you're against the 2A community, but everybody has an opinion on whether or not people should be armed at schools. So what we want to do is play portions of this clip and then engage in a discussion about our experience, what we think. And we encourage anybody that's watching, that's in the chat right now, to join in with us and let's have a nuanced discussion about this issue. So Kevin, what are your thoughts? You gonna play the clip and then we'll roll from there?
I'll play it. I know you have different points you want to pick out, so maybe we'll just stop whenever you see a spot that you want to talk about, then we can break it down there and then continue on.
Yeah, that works for me.
All right, I will play it now.
School safety training is underway all across the state, and we're not talking about fire drills.
School personnel are preparing in ways you probably never imagined as part of sweeping efforts to get armed guardians in every building.
So your job as a teacher is to...
Today's training started with an apology.
Your job's to teach. I'm sorry it's evolved that you have to protect your area.
Yeah. That's the world we live in.
The world we live in means this kindergarten teacher is strapping on a bulletproof vest.
Here we go. Show me what you got.
And practicing how to stop an armed intruder. On inspection, she passed the test.
Game over right now.
All right, stop it right there, Kevin.
Have guns in their classes.
All right, so obviously we're talking about potentially Army teachers are having a response officer in the school that is armed, that is trained. It's a controversial subject because there are a lot of people that believe that no one should have a firearm. Guns should not be brought to school. It's really interesting because I've never really met anybody that had an issue with it in a bank. I've never met anybody that had an issue in it with when it comes to like air travel. I was in the Social Security office last year with my daughter, and there was like 5 armed guards in there, which I thought was surprisingly odd. And I remember asking my daughter, does that make you feel uncomfortable? And she said, no, that makes me feel safe. She's like, nothing's going to happen to us in here. I was looking at the guards, obviously, and a lot of them were overweight. It was kind of funny. But, obviously she saw a firearm. Now, granted, she is a kid that grew up with a father who's in the firearms industry. So, for me, I'm sure there's a little bias there. She understands firearms in a little different light. So the sight of a firearm does not make her uncomfortable. I don't know. What do you think, Kevin?
I'm just interested in the idea in general. And I know there's lots of maybe good ideas that are maybe rushed out too quick. I'm thinking particularly like the NIL and in college. There's a lot of athletes that bring in a lot of revenue, but that whole process seemed a little rushed. Good idea and good intentions to where I think everybody would want to make sure, hey, are we doing this right? If we get the opportunity to prove this is a good solution. So at this point in the video, I'm just curious, not really jumping to any conclusions.
Right. And Clover in the chat has chimed in and said they made it already sound like it's forced. And I don't know of a single district where that is the case. Am I wrong? And I agree with you 100%. Right. I think the irony in a lot of this is, and we can break that down later as we watch some more of the clips, is I feel like that teacher that they just showed was probably very willing and wanted to be that person. And it definitely was not forced. I'm sure if they interviewed that person separately, she would come forward and say, no, this is a responsibility I want to take on. And once again, I think a lot of these responsibilities come with training. No one's just saying, hey, teachers, arm up, let's get out there, get your gun. So anyways, just let's roll a clip, see what else is in here.
Others at the training may serve as school guardians.
That's really good.
Good. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, that's really good.
By law, we can't identify who's who.
All right, let's go.
Time for the next drill. If their adrenaline wasn't up already, it is now. She leaps into action to protect her class.
If they can do what we're teaching them to do today, is lock down and stay in that classroom, their odds are that they will survive this.
That kind of intense shoot-to-kill training is now coming to schools all over the state as they work to identify, arm, and train thousands of school guardians.
Right, but we do need to document.
In this less stressful training, school administrators are learning how to prevent school gun incidents in the first place by learning threat assessments and how to intervene.
Students make threats all the time, and so we want to make sure that we have a process how to differentiate between those threats that are expressions of emotion, a joke, something that is not said with actual intent versus the threats that are truly serious.
Many districts have long
Pause
been
it right there.
requirements outlined.
I actually like that. I think that is a nuanced topic, right? I think we've all been there. We've all said things that we didn't necessarily mean. And I don't think that when you say, how many times, I don't know about you, Kevin, but like when I was a kid, I got in a fight, I would tell someone, I'm going to kill you, right? I didn't mean kill. I just meant beat the shit out of somebody. But I think that one has to be discussed, and I'd be curious to see what the approach is with that. How do you tell if somebody is serious about their threat, or if it was joking, or if it was said in just like, hey, bro, I'm going to see you in the parking lot. When I see you, I'm going to kill you. But you're going out there with just your hands, right? To throw hands. That's a really interesting one. This is one of those times I kind of wish Jake was on here. Just because how do you predict violence? When someone says it, does that mean they're going to do it? Absolutely not. But it's a tough one. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
My mind goes to who's involved in that process of identifying when and what level of flags are raised. We've had conversations where there'll be a reference of, oh, some crazy guy with 30 guns at home, and you raise your hand, well, I'm that crazy guy. It is the firearm community being involved. We're seeing them, law enforcement being involved in the actual training, but is it also involved at that step to be like, oh, no, just because a kid says, oh, my dad owns this many guns doesn't necessarily mean we need to escalate that flag higher, maybe access to firearm, but what does that process look like, and the transparency behind it, and who's involved and who's part of that conversation, to where we get a lot of diverse opinions based off experience.
Yeah, I think it's something that always needs to be addressed. If somebody says something a little out of pocket at a school, like I said, I guess then it becomes a judgment call of those people, of the teachers or counselors, whoever is addressing it with that kid, to make them state their intentions, right, and then gauge the situation. But I definitely like that it's addressed. I think the worst part about it is when you find out in the aftermath that somebody had made threats and nobody did anything, and people were told, right? So I think it's like someone saying, I have a bomb, right? You have to take that serious. You can't just not take that serious, right? They take that very serious at airports. Clover, once again, agrees that, it's got to be addressed. Happy they're doing it. For many teachers, it's just a job. I think there has to be more emphasis on them actually knowing their students, sort of situational awareness. And I agree 100%. But anyways, let's keep rolling.
Lined in 2 school safety bills by Representative Ryan Wilcox. They're a response to the all too frequent school shootings. Every district told us the toughest standard is the one that requires armed guardians in each school. The stipulations: can't be a teacher or principal, must be a volunteer, in school every day, bell to bell. The yearly
Hit
state
pause. This is my only issue with that. As somebody that knows quite a few military folks, quite a few law enforcement folks, some of those people are absolutely the worst people with a firearm, and they admit that they do not train like they should. I don't understand why a teacher, a counselor, or a principal can't be a person who picks up that torch and says, I do want to train. I do want to be that person. I do want to be that thing, that person that's proficient with a firearm. Because, like I said, I know a lot of lawyers, I know a lot of doctors, I know a lot of janitors, right? I know a lot of people from different walks of life that I will get behind in a firefight because I know that they're more trained than, say, my buddy Matt, who's a cop, who only trains once a year, and that's when he goes to qualify. Just because of the cost. It's very cost prohibitive where he is to shoot. So they just don't. They pick other things that they got to do. But someone that's enthusiastic that wants, so I don't understand the theory behind it can't be a teacher, it can't be a principal.
Yeah, I'd be interested too of how that they're blending that individual into the school environment. If you were having a rough day and looking to do harm, having random teachers being armed, that would be tougher to identify to where some random individual walking in the hallway when class is in session. I'd just be curious of like how that an individual blends in a school environment from a potential threats perspective.
Yeah, and one of my issues with that kind of thinking, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are, I've had this discussion in the past. They're like, hey, I had teachers that absolutely shouldn't have had a gun and it would have escalated. Teachers can go off the handle. Anyone can go off the handle. Cops can go off the handle. Military guys can go off the handle. So I don't think it's a matter of I'm afraid because the teacher might go off the handle. Human beings go off handles. Like that's just a fact of life. That's what it is. Doesn't matter if you work for the post office, doesn't matter if you work at Subway, right? Like we've all seen instances of fast food workers flying off the handle and attacking a customer or vice versa. So I don't think there's anything that's tied to less emotional intelligence from a teacher. And I'm a firm believer that most people that get their CCW or most people that train actually will look to de-escalate because they don't want to lose their gun rights or they don't want to jeopardize their gun rights. Clover mentioned the all too frequent. I caught that too. The all too frequent school shooting. That's the craziest part, man. And I will tell you this as somebody who's raised 2 daughters, both of them, one through the public school system, one through the private school system. My daughters would go to school and they would have these active shooter drills and it would freak them out, right? They always come home and talk about the active shooter drill that they went through today. And you could tell that it's something that, was put into their head. And then I'd ask them, did they teach you about fentanyl at all? And both my daughters would go, no. And I'm like, be afraid of that. That's what's going to kill you. You're going to be at a party one day and some guy's going to give you some fentanyl and not even know it and kill you both. They don't drill for stuff like that, but they drill for these active shooter things. Like they're happening all the time. They're not happening all the time. And we don't say that. We don't say that to come off as if we are not saying it's not important. And I have no problem with an active shooter drill. But when you're not addressing all the other things that can kill the kids that are far more frequent than mass shootings at a school, I have a problem with that because now you're stroking fear. I mean, I remember as a kid, and I'm not sure how you felt about fire drills, but I remember when I was young, like the first time I was in a fire drill, I was crying as a kid. Like it scared me to death, even though they kept reassuring me it was a drill. So, I can't imagine what kids are going through when they're going through this process of, Yeah, if there's an active shooter, you need to hide behind your desk and your books and, lock the door and all those things. And I think that stuff is all important to go through. But I mean, it's not making me feel any more uh, comfort, if I'm one of those kids in that class. I mean, I remember my daughter one time, she had done an active shooting drill. And I said, well, how did you feel about it? And she said, yeah, it seemed like a complete waste of time. I mean, the kid could probably just shoot through the glass in the door and open the door. And I was just like, yeah, I go, listen, whatever they tell you, I said, just try to escape. That's your try to go away from where the gunman is and escape through a window or go out. I mean, but yeah, I caught that too, Clover. The all too frequent school shooting. We all know how statistically they jack those numbers up too. It's not to say that one school shooting isn't one too many. That's not what any gun person says. But let's not act like every day our kids are going to school and it's a war zone. I'll roll it.
Hold on, I had a few comments earlier. You were talking about just that one individual of like the work we do. What happens if that guardian individual is having a rough time? And now, what is there a backup plan? Are there backup guardians for school district? Can he be like, hey, I'm in a tough spot mentally. How do I check out of this role for a period of time? Did they consider that? Because if teachers and it was a more of a community thing of multiple individuals at the school were all doing this training, then that pressure wouldn't be on that one individual if they're struggling mentally and needing support, but then feeling like they're letting the whole school district or somebody down by saying, hey, I need a little time out from this role. Going through active school shooter drills for me, I didn't mind it because it was a good look into their preparation. There were multiple agencies and the SWAT team. They did a whole mock scenario at my high school, and it was good to see, hey, they're practicing this, they're preparing if this ever happened. Hopefully it never does, but at least they're preparing and working out any kinks, than only going in a live situation and not really practicing it before.
Yeah, real quick before you roll that, there's something I found out about you today that was news to me, but you actually had an active shooter at your school when you were younger. I want to share a little information about that.
Yeah, I was lucky that it was a snowy day, so we were rolling up in the bus late because of the weather, to where we were just about to go into the doors late, maybe 15 minutes, and then a bunch of people were running out, and we kind of got the tail end to where everybody, I forget who ran out, but they were like, everybody back on the bus now. So we all got back in, saw all the cops, fire department, all the first responders get there, storm in. And then everybody, it took a long time. Nobody knew what was going on. And yeah, the individual, I don't remember how many shots he fired, but grazed a girl on the leg and then shot a kid through the shoulder collarbone area. And that was kind of the extent of it. I think the staff members kind of smothered him, or I forget if he was out of ammunition or the fine details of it, but that was pretty much what happened with my middle school.
Yeah, when I was in high school, we had a kid in one of the schools I went to. I went to 4 high schools, but one of the kids brought a gun to school. He was being bullied by a bunch of kids, and he pulled out the gun. I don't think he was going to do a random mass shooting. I think this was more targeted to people that were bullying him or that he didn't like. But he pulled the gun out, and he just so happened to be standing next to a kid that was on the wrestling team, and the kid like snatched him up real quick and subdued him. So that was the closest I ever came to an actual on-campus shooting. But obviously I'm a little older than you. When I was growing up, we did not have the active shooter drill. We had the earthquake drill and the fire drill. We had those things. The earthquake drill, you just get under your desk, that saves you. The fire drill is more about listening to instruction. So, it's really interesting. Clover says one problem with these drills, assuming the perp is a student, they know how things work in order to better plan. I don't claim to have the answer to those circumstances, just see it as a potential issue. I agree with that. Here's the thing. we know they're soft targets, and the kids know they're soft targets because we've already talked about them in the media being soft targets. So any kid that has any sense and can remember something understands that a school is probably the best place to go to invoke a lot of terror in people, get the notoriety, understand that there might be a slower response. But this is what I'm talking about, right? If people started looking at schools as, yeah, that's a place that, you walk into and there's going to be armed people and you're not going to know who they are, that could change, people's feelings about actually going into that school and causing havoc. Listen, I wouldn't rob a bank without thinking that there's going to be some gunfire might come in my way. I wouldn't go into an airport and not think that was going to happen. And I certainly wouldn't go into the Social Security office and not expect a firefight. So I'm probably not going to pick those places. Probably not going to pick a police station. You're going to go for a soft target. And that's the thing. We've already, blown these things up in the media. So now every kid has a playbook or has a belief system that they can use when they get to this moment where they want to do something horrific. There were guns all over my schools when I was young, and we never got close to an incident. I was about to say the same thing. When I went to school in the state of Washington, which is, a lot of hunters, a lot of kids that grew up with firearms. It was still during the time when people had hunting rifles and things like that. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that we've shifted and changed that way of thinking.
Let's watch the rest of it. I know we're trying to keep this one short. That way we don't get, oh, you only showed partial of it. Let's play it through, and then we can give kind of the comments on the last half of it.
It's just $500.
Last summer, we reported on several of the state's largest districts struggling to find enough volunteers. Well, they had to submit their plans to the state by the end of the year. Were they able to figure it out? We surveyed every district.
The majority of districts plan or hope existing staff members will volunteer for the job.
In Utah County, the districts are gravitating more towards the Guardian program.
St. George schools have their guardians already. Alpine, Canyons, and other large districts are subsidizing the state stipend in order to line up hundreds of volunteers.
You'll have people that have volunteered that are having now some second thoughts. And at the same time, you have other people that didn't initially volunteer who have come forward now.
Ogden, Park City, Wasatch, and others will pay for full-time school resource officers or private security guards. Granite will augment their own police department, but the estimated cost, $6 million, is a huge concern.
We're not willing to sacrifice our class sizes for that, and we're not going to take away from the education of students. So ultimately, that's going to mean a tax increase for taxpayers.
Many districts, especially in rural areas, say they'd rather have trained officers, but they can't pay. And they don't have enough staff who can volunteer anonymously. They plan to apply for exceptions to the law, which is allowed for small schools, so teachers or principals could take the role. And these districts, including Jordan and Salt Lake, responded they're still in progress, without elaborating on their plans to get guardians. The state had allocated $100 million that schools could apply for to purchase safety equipment like teacher panic buttons, reinforced windows, or guardians. But now Representative Wilcox has estimated it may cost as much as $800 million. Aside from funding concerns, many educators told us the training and focus on safety is empowering.
I feel like if somebody's going to be threatening my students, I am the first responder and I need to know how to respond properly.
Will she carry at her school?
I haven't decided yet, but I do feel confident after going through this class that if I do decide, I will have the knowledge that I need to carry.
Whatever they decide, educators believe they'll be more ready when the unthinkable once again becomes the world we live in.
Try to provide a tool beyond just, throwing a book or a chair or barricading themselves behind a door.
Being able to help everybody still know that school is a very, very safe place to be.
Amendments and funding for this law are under discussion right now at the state legislature, but the deadline for this to be in place is next fall. So schools are moving forward to make it happen.
Yeah, no easy answer, but they got to hurry up and pull the trigger,
It's
so to
a
speak.
lot of
on
work.
this,
Yeah,
right?
a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, great story, Dean.
Thanks.
Welcome back.
Yeah. 6 million. That was that number, right? 6 million. Gave a lot of money to the Ukraine lately. I know this is not what a lot of the listeners want to hear, because some people believe that that money is well spent, but 6 million seems like an awfully small number compared to what's been shipped overseas. If it's going to make our kids safe, American children, find the money. That's what I would say. Find the money. Find it somewhere. Like I said, I don't want to put down anything that people believe should be funded, but we're seeing a lot of nonsense. So that seems like a very small price tag to have. So I don't think we have to sacrifice the resources that the schools have, and cut the classes down in order to have safety measures put into place for the children. It just seems bizarre.
My biggest issue is it seemed rushed. It seems, hey, it needs to be in place by this fall. They're going through this process with, like they said, people that thought they were initially interested and then maybe having second thoughts. Maybe people that are seeing the process and being like, oh, I'd be comfortable with that. Why rush something when you're trying to figure out something as important as kind of safety in the schools and protecting them from this potential horrific accident or event? It just doesn't make sense. Take the time to figure out what needs to be fixed. I saw they had money for equipment like, oh, panic buttons. Is that also somebody that's never experienced firearms? Would that purchase a firearm for them and pay for their training if they've met certain qualifications to broaden the pool? I just feel like there's a lot of details and important things to work out on a potential solution to this issue that everybody wants to see tried. But let's do it right and figure out the little details and not rush it.
Yeah, I want panic buttons too. It's crazy. Before I had kids, like I used to not really pay attention to these things. And then I remember like when I had my daughters and I was like looking for schools for them, I was like, man, I want my daughter's schools to have like anti-aircraft gun on top of it. like it didn't bother me at all. You know what I mean? Like I said, I've never met a kid that saw an armed guard that didn't. When I asked, like, how does that make you feel? They always said it makes me feel safe. So it's kind of hard when people are out there saying like, well, a kid doesn't need to visualize this, and then you hear that argument that, well, do we need to make schools like prisons? That's not fair. My argument for that is anybody that's listening, if you feel like making these changes to schools is going to make a school like prison, I invite you to come out to Las Vegas and actually visit the schools out here. They look like prisons. Every single school my daughter's attended looks like a prison or some kind of facility that's correcting people and rehabilitating people. So they already look like that. So I don't think that's not that big of an issue. I still have an issue with not letting the teachers be so teachers are underpaid, and we know this, right? Like that's pretty much, depending on you, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. I think most people would understand that being a teacher is a thankless job, and they do not get the recognition that they get. And there's good teachers and there's bad teachers, but everyone agrees that a teacher's underpaid. To me, there should be some sort of way to incentivize these teachers to want to take the training, become proficient, be that guardian, and maybe it could add a certain bonus to their paycheck, which they already need. I mean, that just makes sense to me. Once again, being an opt-in, not you have to do this.
I'd push back a little just because I wouldn't want individuals that are chasing that $2 an hour or whatever incentive, hoping that statistically they're never in that situation. To where I get it makes sense of like incentivizing paying for the training and not making them barrier to entry. I just wouldn't want that potential negative of, oh, I just did it for the $2 raise an hour or the financial incentive, but really their heart wasn't in it until then. And who's to say that that's not true with somebody that had no financial commitment. Of you have no idea how you would react until you're in that situation. But that would be my only hesitancy to going towards a financial incentive.
And I guess my pushback on that, once again, this is a nuanced discussion, is we just watched a lot of officers in Uvalde not like literally sit there like meerkats instead of going in, and they're paid to go protect people. And then you had the guy in Parkland who, you know, basically sat there while the massacre was happening and didn't go in. And I'm not here to, you know, bash. That's not what this show is about, but I'm just saying that that could also happen for people that literally their sole responsibility is that. So how do you tell who runs towards violence and who runs away from it? You know?
Yeah, we have no predictor thus far. I want to get your thoughts too of if this is one solution that I would think the gun community, 2A community would potentially have for this. Wouldn't it be cool if the firearms community got behind promoting this of like, hey, here is the actual training that answered a lot of questions, made more people that are open to it and curious, and get this solution out to the mainstream, not just leave you and I, who are probably a little bit more educated than the average American on this topic, still have curiosities ourselves. What if the firearm industry kind of revealed all the things and made people really feel good about this that had a lot of questions and concerns? That would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. You know, that goes back to everything we talk about all the time, that the firearms industry has so much more to offer, you know, the public than just, you know, we make guns here when we sell guns, right? There's a lot of knowledge there. There's a lot of people that are proficient. There's a lot of people that could tackle these subjects and provide resources and advice and education and things like that. So no, I completely agree with that. Yeah, I see. Clover agrees with you, saying that, you know, it shouldn't be incentive based. It's a tough one, Clover, because like I said, you know, you could have a guy whose sole job is to protect and serve, and he decides that he's not going into that room or that school to try to solve this issue and take out the threat. So it happens for people that their sole job is that. I don't know. Once again, how do you tell who's going to run towards it and who's not? The only thing I could think of is that it's just people that want to do this, right? They want to do this. I mean, in Uvalde, for Christ's sakes, you had you had one mother in particular that had to break out of handcuffs and go break into the school after she was told not to, and she wasn't even armed, you know? Some people are built for it and some people can't handle it.
Yeah, no, it's clearly a topic that everybody is interested in. I'll be watching its success. Obviously, I live in Utah, so a little bit more closer, and seeing how it's implemented. And I'll be interested to see how the nation responds to something like this, and if it gained momentum, or if there are some flaws along the way that cause others to pause, or what the outcome is.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating subject, and I applaud Utah for actually starting something. You know, I'm not going to argue with people whether this is an epidemic and you know, it's happening all the time, it's frequent, like they came out swinging when they said that. But you know, if you want to make change and you want to change the behavior of the youth who now, you know, see this as a way, an opportunity. And I think this is a good segue to talk about our guest tomorrow on that we have on the show. We actually have a school shooter who went to prison who's going to be a guest on the podcast. What time is our podcast tomorrow?
We're at 11 a.m. my time, so 10 a.m. Pacific.
10 Pacific. We have a podcast tonight. We're doing a podcast now. Sorry, they're all running together. But tomorrow, we are going to have a former school shooter. He's changed his life around. He spent 17 years in incarceration. And I invite anybody that's listening to come on and, any questions people have or comments. I think it's a fascinating story. It's a controversial one. I know that he, I think you have to be brave to come on and kind of face the music and talk about your actions and the things you did. And I know people are going to feel differently about like, hey, like, do you give somebody like that a platform? Does that help or hurt? But I think it does help just because it's very unique. Usually we don't get a chance to talk to the perpetrator of the incident. They either die by suicide, get taken out, and then it's a wrap, or they're put in prison and we never really hear from them again, right? But this gentleman served his time and he's out and he wants to make a difference in the world. So I think it's going to be an interesting perspective. So I encourage anyone that hears this tonight or is listening now to join us tomorrow at 10 Pacific, to kind of peek behind the curtain of the mind of somebody who committed one of these horrific acts.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another conversation here in two hours, everybody. We're speaking. You want to give a little background on tonight's guest and then we'll wrap it up?
Yeah, we're speaking with James Bigham. He's a friend of mine that I met in when Jake and I were doing a lot of speaking engagements in the state of Wisconsin, and he's he's not apologetic at all. He is a liberal ER doctor who wants to connect with the firearms industry. He truly believes. Doesn't matter how you feel about guns, but the best people to work with is the firearms industry, and he's trying to get his curriculum off the ground for his doctors and behavioral health people and everything like that. But he wants to work with the gun industry, not against the gun industry. Very open-minded guy, and I'm excited to talk to him about all the work that he's doing. And he recently got recognized in an article which we have shared, which we'll probably have queued up for the show, talking about his work. And once again, he's a guy that wants to come on the show, and we'll face whatever questions that we pose to him. So,
all right, thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you in about 2 hours.
Yep. Thank you, Clover. Appreciate you chiming in.